E4. We got another E4 game. All right. What's the most common answer here? What are we seeing? What are we seeing? I haven't decided yet, but I'm going to start with C5. I haven't decided. Still up for grabs. There's a lot of Sicilians, honestly. And he played knight F3. So he's going main line, which already is reasonably rare. You wouldn't believe how many people just play bishop C4 here. Truly. F5 now. You see, this is the type of move that chess.com might get suspicious about. I'm going to have to veto that one. All right. Knight C6, knight F6. We're going to play some standard moves here. I'm assuming D4, but no. The knight C3 angle. Now, hang on a sec. He can still play D4 here. So we're not fully out of an open Sicilian yet. He could still play D4. Yeah, E5 is definitely a move. I'm more interested in E6 because I'm having this feeling he might be a bishop C4 kind of guy. Let's play E6. Now, you could just play D4. That's fine. We'll just transpose. But E6, I'm wondering where this bishop goes. It could go to B5. This is another relatively standard move. But I think it's got to be, either he opens the position, plays a regular game, or A3. What does that tell us about him? He's definitely looking to play bishop C4 and tuck that thing on A2. Almost for sure now. D5 tempting, but, it allows bishop B5, which I'm not a big fan of. So I think I'm going to hit the A6 button. If bishop goes here, then we'll be able to play B5. D4, so he's opened up the center. Takes. Always take in the Sicilian. Knight takes back, and now I think we're just playing pretty much the main line, one of the main lines of the Taimanov. Queen C7, baby. And this brings us to a whole other discussion. A3 is actually one of the main lines, but I would say it's kind of an advanced line. I'll be interested to find out whether he knows it or not. I'm taking with the queen. I want my bishop here. Isn't it the Khan? No. Main distinction between the Khan and the Taimanov is the Taimanov has a knight on C6 and the Khan has a knight on D7. So D6, knight D7, and the same structure would be the Khan. Queen C7, knight C6 is more of this Taimanov. Okay, B5. He wants to go here and put the bishop there. That's fine. I'll be right here waiting for you, bud. B5, bishop B7. Who's actually threatening who here? Okay, he's castled. Looks like a reasonable position. Our knight can develop to F6. That doesn't mean that it should, but I'm just saying, it can. Knight F6, E5 would be the end of the game. F5 looks tempting, but remember, guys, F5's not making a threat. Taking here is suicide. That's crazy. So F5 I don't really like. White's going to go rook E1, and F5 is one of these moves where you hope that they take you, but you're actually not ready to take them, ever. So, to be avoided. Bishop takes a3, also complete nonsense. Rook takes, b4, rook b3, takes. Your dark squares are going to be crying. This opening is light square pawns, which means your MVP piece is the bishop on f8. You can't really give it away for a knight, which is essentially what this move does. Crazy. Can't do. So I think I have a couple moves here. Knight f6, bishop c5, or h5, h4. Those are the moves I'm thinking of. Rook c8's another classic Taimanov move. But I think I'm between these. Between these moves right now. One, two, three, four. h5 seems a little early, if I'm honest. I'm kind of curious where he's going to go, so I'm going to wait with rook c8. I do think these squares make sense, but I'm just going to make a good-looking move, standard move, pass the ball to him and say, all right, you go. You go. Rook e1 would be a nice move. Bishop e3. Bishop f4. Definitely not a bad move, but I would say I'm reasonably happy to see it. Bishop f4. So if bishop out, maybe queen g4 is a small issue. Not sure about that. Yeah, knight f6. Looks like a very solid move here. I like knight f6. Knight e7 becomes increasingly tempting just because knight g6 exists. So I have to be honest, knight e7, knight g6, just because it gains time here, does look pretty good, but knight e7, bishop d6, knight g6, bishop takes f8. I don't know if that's terribly impressive anymore. So if I want to do this, I think I have to move this bishop first. But bishop there, queen g4 is what I wasn't really liking. So I think I will continue like this. That is still working in our favor. Don't tell me the whole chat's blundering e5 and checkmate. No. You guys can't be making that mistake. I want to have you guys as my opponents. Can you sub in for this guy? My life would be a lot easier if I was playing you. I want him to play e5. h5, knight g4 is also an option, as well as, of course, h5, h4. Bishop c5 potentially next. f3 is a way to make e5 work, but once you play f3, I mean, your pieces are not happy with you there. So f3 would be a very welcome sight from my perspective. If white plays a4, then I'll play b4. But I'm not looking to play b4 before then. That's not of interest to me. I'd like to leave my pawns like this if I can, but maybe bishop e7, d6 is how I develop here. I think white's queen belongs on one of these two squares, that's for sure. D2, I don't know. It allows this knight to kind of jump around, but it's synchronizes better with the bishop. Queen E2. Okay, and we see the bishop move again, which I would say is a little bit wrong. Yeah, something feels off about that move. By the way, even bishop takes knight is not a really like bothersome move here, taking with the g pawn. But that being said, bishop e7 is a basic developing move here that I think we can play because it defends the knight. Why not? But just so we're clear, this is not the end of the world for me. Not at all. So yeah, I think bishop e7 is good. Gets developed, gets me maybe ready to castle, guards the knight, maybe d6 is the next move. And if you play this and don't take the knight, I'm really wondering what you're up to there. So let's see. And if his plan is just develop, go here, and take, I mean, what kind of journey, what kind of life is that for this bishop? Right? You just like spawn, go to f4, go to e5, and then die. It's like this is the POV of the sperm cells that don't make it. Just bishop f4, bishop e5, bishop takes f6, and no one remembers your name. Tough life. I'm playing d6 next. I'm castling. And you still can't play e5. We need two. I'm thinking d6 here because I actually want to encourage the move bishop takes f6. I mean, this is like dream for me. Again, there's no e5. Remember that. All right, dream come true. It would actually be very tempting here. It'd be great news for us. But if knight d5, of course we won't take it. We'll just grab this pawn or bring the bishop back. The knight on d5 once we castle is just going to have to move again. So looks fancy, but doesn't actually do much. Now rook to c1. At this point, guys, it is way too strong to take this knight. I simply cannot say no. I have to take it. Right? If I don't take it now, the knight's going to move. Guard this pawn. White will play c3. Although we'll be happy, it doesn't compare to these weak pawns and potentially just a free pawn. So we're definitely going to take. However, once we get to this position, I may pause here and just evaluate whether or not I want to take right away. It could be that castling is the better move, so I'll at least have a look. Queen takes c3 looks damn good though. It really does. I think if I castle, white plays rook d1, and then if I take, rook takes here. Although we take another pawn, white also gets a pawn on d6. Whereas if we take right away, rook d1, then I can just take another pawn. Right? Because then you can't touch my d pawn there. So I do think taking right away is the move, especially because I can castle in one move. I can do it anytime I want. So that's reassuring. Knowing that at any moment I can castle. If a4, I'll probably just take it. Oh. You can't be offering such nice things to me. A queen trade? You shouldn't have. Really, you're too kind. So, queen takes d3 is obviously going to be a decent move. Because if he takes, well, I'm up a pawn. So, That's definitely a positive sign for my position. But and what I'm about to tell you is the truth. You know it's the truth. Because it's a big but. And they don't lie. But if he takes me, that is much more beneficial than if I take him. Like, his pawns are in disarray here. So, if I could get him to take me, I'd be a lot happier than if I took him. Now, I don't know if I can force that. Because if I castle, queen takes d6, right? Perhaps a little uncomfortable. But I am potentially interested in the move king e7. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it. The only issue with king e7 would be if he somehow like got his queen to g5. But I don't see how he can do that. Like, the best he could do is take me. He could play rook d1 after king e7, and then I'll play rook d8. Seems like we always have the answer. King e7, e5. Always have to double check stuff like this. Right? Because if queen takes here. So e5, then I think we take here. And then, even if we take, we get to an endgame where his two pawns are like that. So, I do like myself a little king e7 foray. And, oh, if he takes this, it's done. It's done. It's too much. And remember, if things go bad, after rook d8, we could just castle ourselves anyway with king f8 and, you know, that will be there later for us. So we don't have to worry too much. You have to remember, we're about to be in an endgame here. In an endgame, we absolutely want the king in the center. Much different than being over there. Again, queen takes looks like a tremendous move, but rook d8 is very much in line with what we've been talking about. Bending that pawn. Now, e5 has still been on my mind, always, as a dangerous move for my opponent. But I think I can play queen takes queen, and we should be okay in all those variations. If he wants to keep the queen on the board, he's got to do one of these two moves. Okay, you know, he's going to be giving up maybe the A pawn there. Could get messy. And e5 would be a welcomed sight. So what is he going to do? Tough choice, honestly. Yeah, if e5, I think it's important we play queen takes. So e5 is going to open up a world of calculation here, but we're ready for this move. We're ready for it because I mentioned it already a few moves back. So if this move is not something that I had looked at previously, this would be quite a shock, actually, because it is a very tricky move. if bishop takes here, all of a sudden pawn takes, and I can't take back because the queen's defending, and he can always take back right away. If I push the pawn, queen takes h7, and who knows what's happening there. That's pretty scary. And our bishop is hanging, so if we take the pawn, he'll trade the queens and win a bishop. Taking here runs into that. But the important thing is that we can get rid of this queen, first of all. So that's the first step. Now, pawn takes here is not going to be as much of a problem. If he takes here, I think the game will basically end because we have queen takes. So we must take it back. Okay, let's make sure we get the order of the moves right here. If pawn takes pawn, bishop takes here can technically be played because even though rook takes would win a rook, he can take the c8 rook. But okay, here, takes, and bishop takes. That's more obvious. I'm down a piece, so we can't do that. Yes, d5 is possible, but if we take the bishop, takes, rook takes, takes, king takes, rook c3. He's losing another pawn there. His rook's stuck defending. So we can play d5. Totally fine. But I see us entering a very favorable endgame here. Very favorable. Which is why I'm going to take this. If he takes it back, no problem. Right? Now I'm just up even another pawn. And after he takes, I'm probably going to take with the king. Looks silly, but I want to leave this rook pressuring the c-pawn. We have the dream. After we won material, we got to trade off pieces, win more material, and trade off queens, the most important thing. This is fantastic. Okay. Rook e3. So we need to defend this. f6 possible, but I don't think I'm gonna locate anything better than rook d5 for the moment. This move guards the pawn. If he commits both rooks to it, then I might just take this and say, okay, you have that, I'll have this. Additionally, it also helps me potentially double the rooks. So I'm happy with that as well. c3. I think it's time to bring the rook in. There's one concept here which is kind of important. It might not matter as much because I can always play f6, but if you're doubling your rooks and you really want to put pressure on this pawn, then you don't want to have your leading rook also being the one that's performing a defensive task. Meaning, if I go here, if at any point I win this pawn, I will lose that pawn, guaranteed. But if I go rook c4 and double like that, then there are a lot of instances where I could win this pawn without losing the e-pawn. So it'll put more pressure on my opponent if the rook behind the two rooks is the one actually performing a defensive task. If I go rook here, the rook's kind of overloaded. Like, I can't do both at the same time. But if it's behind, then I actually can. And rook c4 does a lot of other good things as well. Like I want to play rook a4. Nice to control this 4th rank to maybe stop some of these pawns advancing. And it fixes that weakness on c3. It can't move at all. Neither can this pawn. So rook here will actually force the rook to go to a1. At some point, a5 and b4 will be good, but I don't want to play a5 just yet until I'm ready, because then all of a sudden my b pawn becomes a target. And right now it's the only target's a6, and that can't be attacked. So I'm good. Let's gain some more space. If white was a GM, do I think this is holdable? Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think if white was a GM, he would do a pretty good job holding this L. Nitsid prime. Of course, this is not defensible. Down 2 pawns? Hell no. You could let an engine play this. You could let an engine play this, and there's no shot. No shot. Okay, rook here. Well, you may have noticed there is a little bit of a threat happening here. Just a little bit of a threat. e4, king e2. Forced, by the way, because king here, king f6, you're basically going to lose the game. There will be a checkmate coming your way, or heavy loss of material. After e4, king e2, I would probably just continue my attack of these pawns. But another way for me to play is to bring my king up, like king f6, just to guard this pawn, and then switch the rook here like that. So both of those moves will be incredibly winning. I don't think that I really prefer one over the other. Both look pretty good. So let's just pick one and move on. e4. King e2 kind of goes right in the middle of these rooks, which is not great coordination. King g2, though, just doesn't make sense. You're going away from the action. And king f4, it looks like you're helping. Like, you know, you're right up there with all the big boys here, but your king there will be subject to a mating net. And the only way out of it that I can see is to play g4, but then g5, king g3, f4, will lose a rook. That should be pretty painful. So we're waiting for the king move, but it probably won't really affect my next couple of ideas. I'm probably going to go king here no matter what, so that in the event that this pawn gets removed, for example f3, that the other pawn can then move up to e5 where it's going to be defended. So the reason that my position is so strong is, well, the 2 pawns help, I'm not going to lie. But think about the counterplay that white has. White has 2 rooks. They're not able to operate on any sort of dangerous open file at all yet. The only 2 files that are truly open, my rooks are occupying. And the one that the rooks are on, which is the only other semi-open file, I've got 2 pawns in the way, supported very nicely. can't pawn break anywhere. So there's not really any file where the rooks can do any damage on. And that's why black's position is just overwhelmingly good. It's one thing to be up 2 pawns, great. But there's just no counterplay for white. There's absolutely nothing to do. And anytime white wants to challenge one of the open files, I'm happy to trade rooks, because that'll just get me closer to a win. All right, king g2. He did go away from the action. I would say that f3 is kind of, I wouldn't say it's a threat, but it's an idea of his next. Well, rook d3 is tempting just because it pretty much forces a trade, and I was just saying how strong it would be to trade pieces, trade rooks. It'll just get me closer to the finish line. So I think I'm just gonna go for rook d3. I think it's the simplest. King f6, good move. e5, good move. Rook c5, good move. Rook d2, good move. Rook a4, good move. Don't think that if this wasn't your move that you're blundering. But to me, it's the simplest, because it just gets me closer and closer to what I want, which is trading the most amount of pieces so that the only thing left are maybe my 2 extra pawns. That'll always be winning. All right, here we go. So, rook c1, and now I think I'm in a kind of comfortable position, because there's not much that my opponent can do in the way of counterplay. So, taking looks like a phenomenal option. Takes, the rook is tied down here. I'm going to start by removing the rook. My rook has this beautiful ability to just shuffle between the pawns now, right? And his rook would just have to chase me. Like, it's a it's a really nasty defensive position for him. But you'll notice that this rook can only move to 2 squares. If I play a5 and he goes here, I'm taking every single one of these pawns. If I go a5 and he doesn't go there, I'm playing b4. And because it's pinned, I'm winning yet another pawn. And remember, even though it looks like things are kind of locked up over here, this is a 5-on-3. I'm very much ahead over there. There's b4. Using the pin. And I will make a recommendation here. Well, I would say that pawn takes with a rook behind the pawn is just clearly winning. Rook takes in this particular position happens to be pretty dominant, because the king can't really do anything, and I have rook c2 check. But I'm going to take with the pawn in an effort to prove a point. I think this is a very effective way to win. So you take, and honestly, when I see this move, and this would apply to a lot of positions, push the pawn as far as you possibly can. And I mean, even here, I know it looks like a weird technique. Like, I took with the pawn instead of the rook. Why would I do that? And then I'm pushing the pawn. But I'm doing this so that if he takes, I'm happy to take. I got 5-on-3. This is a very easy king and pawn endgame. And if he goes king up, now I've got him in a position where it's like, okay, go ahead and take me, right? I'm waiting for this. And if you ever move your rook, maybe to try to get counterplay, I'm going to queen my pawn. I'm going to force you to take me. I'm going to force you to trade rooks. So it's literally impossible for white to avoid a rook trade here, unless he just shuffles his king the rest of the game. So There we go. He has to trade the rooks. It's the only, and I got 5 pawns here. You've got 3. First, we'll try to improve the king as much as we can. And then we'll slowly start to advance these pawns. I got too many pawns here. Okay, well, he's moving the king backwards, which already means I think he's giving up a little bit too much here. He could have tried to keep his king like that, but we would have just broken through. If h4, I wouldn't play h6 and allow h5, then my pawns can't move. But h4, I would play g6, and then h6, and then g5, and then f4. Advance the pawns slowly. No rush. Don't want to get into a position like this where white plays h5, and it's like, wait a minute, I can't move my pawn. But it's one of my favorite techniques when you've got a rook and a pawn, and your rook's behind the pawn. If you're already up more material on the other side of the board, push the pawn as far as it will go. Even if the king is coming over to maybe take your pawn, you want to trade rooks with your opponent. So just shove that thing down the board. It's impossible to deal with, really. I've noticed the theme. And this has been, over my experience playing in the rapid time control on chess.com. I'm at 1400 here, and something that is in common with 95% of players is that people spend the most time on their moves when they're lost. Nobody spends time thinking when there's stuff to actually think about. People spend the most times on their moves when the game is over. And just to demonstrate, this is what I would have done against h4. I would have played g6. The way I feel when I see, and of course I'm a little bit tongue-in-cheek here because I like to see people using time no matter what. But when people are making, instant flash moves the entire game, but then they're down a queen and all of a sudden they start thinking, it's the equivalent of like being down 6-0 in a soccer match, and then, the ref going for like 5 substitutions and calling a timeout and drawing up a play. It's like, okay, relax, man. What are we doing here? What's really happening? King here. I'm gonna chase you down here. I'm outflanking. Can't call timeout in soccer? Actually, you can. That just shows how little you guys know about the sport. Have you ever heard of Italians? Yeah. Let's just say they know how to call a timeout when the team needs one. Let's go here. I'm going to take this pawn. Unfortunately, you're just being chased one square at a time into your own private corner. I'll go ahead and yoink this from you. I think it belonged to me anyway. Now this looks like a nasty attempt to ruin my pawn structure, and I will not have it. I will not have it. Nope. My wall of pawns is going to remain intact. Mark my words. No, it has to be resignation. I'm going for the other one too, bud. Don't think I won't. Don't think I won't. This is a rapid game. I get 10 seconds per move. We could be here all day. Oh, these guys are about to say hello. Uh-oh. I think this is a constellation, right? I think I've seen this one before. It's a well-known constellation. GG. Gotta take your KOs. Always. We got a nice Sicilian game here. I quite enjoyed this game. I thought there were learning opportunities at many points. We got to see a pretty standard mainline opening. We got to see my opponent, come up with his own plan at 1200. It wasn't a great one, but it was his own plan. He didn't really blunder anything major except pawns, right? He didn't make any serious mistakes. Like, this was a blunder. Maybe a mistake is a better word. But he didn't really blunder, like, big time. He tried to come up with e5. And we chose the right move order here. But he didn't play a bad game for 1200. And then he just got ground down in a rook endgame. But he really didn't make a ton of mistakes. It's just, we got to see all phases of the game. The opening, the middle game, and then the end game. And then we went stargazing at the end. GG. GG.